At dawn, the marble plaza stood hushed, its silence broken when a gang swaggered in, jeering at the lone black guard pacing before the tomb of the unknowns. To them, Isaiah Marshall looked like nothing more than a ceremonial soldier in polished buttons, an easy target to mock and provoke. They mistook his stillness for weakness, his composure for fear. What they couldn't see was the truth. Behind that immaculate uniform stood years of Delta Force command, discipline honed to steel. When they crossed the rope line, they weren't stepping toward a victim. They were awakening a storm they could never contain. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The marble plaza stretched silent in the preed. On darkness, rows of white headstones barely visible through the low-hanging fog. Isaiah Marshall stood at attention in his perfectly pressed ceremonial uniform, the polished buttons and badges gleaming under the plaza lights. His movements were precise and measured as he performed the sacred 21, step march before the tomb of the unknowns. A small group of early morning visitors huddled near the rope line, veterans with caps displaying their service branches, families holding their children close, and a cluster of middle school students on a field trip. Their hushed whispers and occasional camera clicks merged with the distant hum of a maintenance cart. The harsh rumble of a pickup truck engine shattered the reverent quiet. Isaiah maintained his ceremonial pace, but his trained senses noted the vehicle idling beyond the plaza boundary. 6 men emerged, their heavy boots scraping against the pavement as they positioned themselves along the rope line. Their leader, Colt Ransom, held up his phone with a smirk, starting a live stream. "Hey boys, look what we got here." Colt's voice carried across the plaza. "Think he can hear us in that fancy costume?" The other men snickered, their phones also raised to record. Their taunts grew louder, more vicious, filled with racial slurs that made the tourists flinch and pull their children closer. Isaiah continued his measured steps, face forward, maintaining the dignity of his watch. A glass bottle sailed through the air, spinning end over end before shattering near the wreath stand. Shards of glass scattered across the sacred ground. The tourists gasped. Several children started crying. Isaiah stopped his march, turning with precise military bearing to face the group. His voice carried clearly across the plaza, deep and controlled. "This is hallowed ground. Stay behind the rope line and show proper respect, or you will be removed." Colt's laugh was ugly. He ducked under the rope, his crew following his lead. Or what, soldier boy? He made a show of looking around. "Don't see no backup here." Isaiah shifted his stance subtly, feet narrowing their position, breathing becoming measured and controlled, hands relaxing open at his sides. To the untrained eye, he appeared unchanged in his ceremonial bearing, but his body was now coiled and ready. Years of Delta Force training hummed beneath the surface. 2 of the men moved to flank him on either side, following Colt's quick hand signals. The first grabbed for Isaiah's sleeve, meaty fingers reaching for the pristine uniform. Isaiah moved with fluid grace, catching the man's wrist and peeling it back in one smooth motion. He followed through with a shoulder pin, controlling the attacker's momentum and guiding him face down onto the marble with careful precision to avoid head injury. The second man charged forward with a roar. Isaiah pivoted, using the attacker's own momentum to slam him into the guardrail. The impact knocked the wind from the man's lungs. The rail served as a barrier, ensuring the tomb remained protected from the violence. A metallic click announced the third attacker, extending a collapsible baton. The man swung it in a wide arc, but Isaiah was already moving. He stepped inside the strike zone, protecting himself with a raised elbow while simultaneously capturing the man's forearm. With precise control, he redirected the baton's momentum, causing it to crack against the attacker's own thigh. A quick twist stripped the weapon from numbed fingers. Phones recorded from every angle as tourists captured the scene. The veterans in the crowd stood rigid, faces hard with anger at this desecration. Through it all, Isaiah maintained his position, always keeping his body between the attackers and the tomb he was sworn to guard. "Make him swing first," Colt shouted to his remaining men, trying to provoke Isaiah into throwing a punch, get him to lose control. But Isaiah remained precisely controlled. Each defensive move was calculated to neutralize rather than harm. His face stayed impassive, betraying no emotion as he protected the sacred ground. Movement caught his eye. One of Colt's toadies had circled wide, pulling a knife from his pocket. The blade snicked open, gleaming as the man lunged toward the memorial wreath. Isaiah stepped off the guard mat in one fluid motion, turning to intercept the attack. His left hand shot out to catch the knife wrist, while his right foot hooked behind the attacker's ankle, ready to take him down. Isaiah's grip remained vice-like on the knife wielder's wrist, muscles tensing as he executed the next move with surgical precision. In one fluid motion, he rotated the captured arm into a figure, forelock, his thumb pressing firmly against the blade's spine to prevent any slashing motion. The attacker's eyes widened in shock as Isaiah's knee drove into his hip, forcing him to buckle. The knife clattered harmlessly to the marble floor. A shadow loomed from the right. Another attacker charging like a bull. Isaiah dropped low, years of training taking over as he grabbed the man's belt and shirt. Using the attacker's own momentum, he executed a perfect hip throw. The man sailed through the air, landing hard on the steps. Isaiah's control was evident even in the takedown, carefully positioning the impact to keep the attacker's head from cracking against the marble edge. Colt stepped forward, bouncing on the balls of his feet with the cocky stance of an MMA fighter. His eyes locked onto Isaiah, studying, calculating. He threw 2 quick feints, testing Isaiah's reactions. Isaiah read the rhythm like a book. The feints were setups for the overhand right that followed. Instead of backing away, Isaiah stepped in close. His jab struck Colt's sternum with precise force, enough to stun but not crush. Before Colt could recover, Isaiah dropped and swept his lead leg, executing a textbook ankle pick. Colt crashed down, pinned against the stair edge, confusion replacing his earlier confidence. His words cut off in a grunt of surprise. 2 more attackers rushed in from different angles. Isaiah's footwork was masterful, almost dance-like, as he maneuvered them into each other's path. The borrowed baton became an extension of his arm, not as a weapon, but as a precise tool for leverage. He trapped one man's arm, using the baton to direct him into his companion. When one attacker managed to break free and lunge, Isaiah's forearm found his throat with calculated pressure. Not enough to crush, but sufficient to trigger the body's natural response. The man stumbled back, coughing and gasping. Throughout the fight, Isaiah's attention never fully left the tomb. His eyes darted regularly to check the memorial wreath, ensuring it remained untouched and upright. Each defensive move was positioned to maintain that protective barrier between the violence and the sacred ground he guarded. From the crowd of onlookers, a veteran's voice rang out, clear and commanding, "Hold your ground, soldier." The wail of sirens grew louder as patrol cars turned onto the cemetery avenue, their red and blue lights cutting through the morning fog. The final attacker, eyes wide with mounting panic, made his move. His charge was sloppy, uncoordinated, the desperate lunge of someone who knew they'd lost but couldn't stop themselves. At dawn, the marble plaza stood hushed, its silence broken when a gang swaggered in, jeering at the lone black guard pacing before the tomb of the unknowns. To them, Isaiah Marshall looked like nothing more than a ceremonial soldier in polished buttons, an easy target to mock and provoke. They mistook his stillness for weakness, his composure for fear. What they couldn't see was the truth. Behind that immaculate uniform stood years of Delta Force command, discipline honed to steel. When they crossed the rope line, they weren't stepping toward a victim. They were awakening a storm they could never contain. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The marble plaza stretched silent in the preed. On darkness, rows of white headstones barely visible through the low-hanging fog. Isaiah Marshall stood at attention in his perfectly pressed ceremonial uniform, the polished buttons and badges gleaming under the plaza lights. His movements were precise and measured as he performed the sacred 21 step march before the tomb of the unknowns. A small group of early morning visitors huddled near the rope line, veterans with caps displaying their service branches, families holding their children close, and a cluster of middle school students on a field trip. Their hushed whispers and occasional camera clicks merged with the distant hum of a maintenance cart. The harsh rumble of a pickup truck engine shattered the reverent quiet. Isaiah maintained his ceremonial pace, but his trained senses noted the vehicle idling beyond the plaza boundary. 6 men emerged, their heavy boots scraping against the pavement as they positioned themselves along the rope line. Their leader, Colt Ransom, held up his phone with a smirk, starting a live stream. "Hey boys, look what we got here." Colt's voice carried across the plaza. "Think he can hear us in that fancy costume?" The other men snickered, their phones also raised to record. Their taunts grew louder, more vicious, filled with racial slurs that made the tourists flinch and pull their children closer. Isaiah continued his measured steps, face forward, maintaining the dignity of his watch. A glass bottle sailed through the air, spinning end over end before shattering near the wreath stand. Shards of glass scattered across the sacred ground. The tourists gasped. Several children started crying. Isaiah stopped his march, turning with precise military bearing to face the group. His voice carried clearly across the plaza, deep and controlled. "This is hallowed ground. Stay behind the rope line and show proper respect, or you will be removed." Colt's laugh was ugly. He ducked under the rope, his crew following his lead. Or what, soldier boy? He made a show of looking around. "Don't see no backup here." Isaiah shifted his stance subtly, feet narrowing their position, breathing becoming measured and controlled, hands relaxing open at his sides. To the untrained eye, he appeared unchanged in his ceremonial bearing, but his body was now coiled and ready. Years of Delta Force training hummed beneath the surface. 2 of the men moved to flank him on either side, following Colt's quick hand signals. The first grabbed for Isaiah's sleeve, meaty fingers reaching for the pristine uniform. Isaiah moved with fluid grace, catching the man's wrist and peeling it back in one smooth motion. He followed through with a shoulder pin, controlling the attacker's momentum and guiding him face down onto the marble with careful precision to avoid head injury. The second man charged forward with a roar. Isaiah pivoted, using the attacker's own momentum to slam him into the guardrail. The impact knocked the wind from the man's lungs. The rail served as a barrier, ensuring the tomb remained protected from the violence. A metallic click announced the third attacker, extending a collapsible baton. The man swung it in a wide arc, but Isaiah was already moving. He stepped inside the strike zone, protecting himself with a raised elbow while simultaneously capturing the man's forearm. With precise control, he redirected the baton's momentum, causing it to crack against the attacker's own thigh. A quick twist stripped the weapon from numbed fingers. Phones recorded from every angle as tourists captured the scene. The veterans in the crowd stood rigid, faces hard with anger at this desecration. Through it all, Isaiah maintained his position, always keeping his body between the attackers and the tomb he was sworn to guard. "Make him swing first," Colt shouted to his remaining men, trying to provoke Isaiah into throwing a punch, get him to lose control, but Isaiah remained precisely controlled. Each defensive move was calculated to neutralize rather than harm. His face stayed impassive, betraying no emotion as he protected the sacred ground. Movement caught his eye. One of Colt's toadies had circled wide, pulling a knife from his pocket. The blade snicked open, gleaming as the man lunged toward the memorial wreath. Isaiah stepped off the guard mat in one fluid motion, turning to intercept the attack. His left hand shot out to catch the knife wrist, while his right foot hooked behind the attacker's ankle, ready to take him down. Isaiah's grip remained vice-like on the knife wielder's wrist, muscles tensing as he executed the next move with surgical precision. In one fluid motion, he rotated the captured arm into a figure, forelock, his thumb pressing firmly against the blade's spine to prevent any slashing motion. The attacker's eyes widened in shock as Isaiah's knee drove into his hip, forcing him to buckle. The knife clattered harmlessly to the marble floor. A shadow loomed from the right, another attacker charging like a bull. Isaiah dropped low, years of training taking over as he grabbed the man's belt and shirt. Using the attacker's own momentum, he executed a perfect hip throw. The man sailed through the air, landing hard on the steps. Isaiah's control was evident even in the takedown, carefully positioning the impact to keep the attacker's head from cracking against the marble edge. Colt stepped forward, bouncing on the balls of his feet with the cocky stance of an MMA fighter. His eyes locked onto Isaiah, studying, calculating. He threw 2 quick feints, testing Isaiah's reactions. Isaiah read the rhythm like a book. The feints were setups for the overhand right that followed. Instead of backing away, Isaiah stepped in close. His jab struck Colt's sternum with precise force, enough to stun but not crush. Before Colt could recover, Isaiah dropped and swept his lead leg, executing a textbook ankle pick. Colt crashed down, pinned against the stair edge, confusion replacing his earlier confidence. His words cut off in a grunt of surprise. 2 more attackers rushed in from different angles. Isaiah's footwork was masterful, almost dance-like, as he maneuvered them into each other's path. The borrowed baton became an extension of his arm, not as a weapon, but as a precise tool for leverage. He trapped one man's arm, using the baton to direct him into his companion. When one attacker managed to break free and lunge, Isaiah's forearm found his throat with calculated pressure. Not enough to crush, but sufficient to trigger the body's natural response. The man stumbled back, coughing and gasping. Throughout the fight, Isaiah's attention never fully left the tomb. His eyes darted regularly to check the memorial wreath, ensuring it remained untouched and upright. Each defensive move was positioned to maintain that protective barrier between the violence and the sacred ground he guarded. From the crowd of onlookers, a veteran's voice rang out, clear and commanding, "Hold your ground, soldier." The wail of sirens grew louder as patrol cars turned onto the cemetery avenue, their red and blue lights cutting through the morning fog. The final attacker, eyes wide with mounting panic, made his move. His charge was sloppy, uncoordinated, the desperate lunge of someone who knew they'd lost but couldn't stop themselves. Morton Alois scoffed, "Same man I saw at Trevor Slate's Christmas gala last year, laughing like old friends." Isaiah's email pinged official cemetery letterhead. Notice of immediate suspension. The carefully worded message cited neutrality protocols and pending investigation requirements. Nia was fighting back online. Isaiah watched her thread unfold: witness statements, timestamp photos showing the bottle's trajectory, demands for the cemetery's security footage, but each post disappeared under an avalanche of coordinated replies calling her fake news and worse. "They're trying to bury the truth," Isaiah said quietly, standing to pace the small kitchen. "Not just what happened, but why it happened." Alois turned down the soup and moved to the window, watching the street. 2 news vans had already parked across the way. "Remember what your granddaddy used to say about lies?" she asked. "They run sprints. Truth runs marathons." The doorbell rang. Isaiah checked the security camera he'd installed last year. A uniformed courier with a clipboard. In the living room, under the old family photos, he signed for the certified letter. The suspension notice was crisp, official, cold. Administrative hearing scheduled for 0900 hours, 2 days hence. Alois had followed him in, her face set with the same determination he'd seen in photographs of her at civil rights marches decades ago. The same quiet strength that had faced down fire hoses now faced this new assault on dignity. Isaiah stood at the window, watching the news vans and remembering the morning's whispered threat. You were supposed to be alone. They'd planned this. The attack, the edited video, the charges, all of it orchestrated to erase what really happened. They think they can make us doubt what we saw with our own eyes, Alois said, resting a weathered hand on his shoulder. Her touch carried the weight of history, of battles fought, lost, and won again. We've been bent before, she said firmly, not broken. Outside, more media vehicles were arriving. Phones rang unanswered. The soup simmered on the stove. Its familiar scent a reminder of home, of family, of truth worth defending. Isaiah felt the suspension notice in his hand, paper creasing under his fingers as the day's last light faded from the windows. The next morning, a soft rain pattered against the porch roof as Isaiah sat in his grandmother's old rocking chair. Steam rose from his coffee mug, mixing with the cool morning air. His phone screen glowed with an endless stream of messages. A stark divide between support and hatred. Got your six, brother, wrote a Marine veteran who'd been at the plaza. My whole unit saw what really went down. Scrolling down, race trader, from an anonymous account, followed by detailed threats about what they'd do to his house. Isaiah took another sip of coffee, his face unchanging. He'd learned long ago that reaction was what they wanted. Through the window, he could see Alois in the kitchen already making calls to her church network, her voice carrying that same steady strength it had held through decades of struggle. His phone buzzed, Nia's name on the screen, Isaiah. She said without preamble, her voice tight with urgency. I've got something. A contractor reached out through secure channels. Says the cemetery's surveillance system maintains off-site server backups. Everything from yesterday should be their original and unedited. Isaiah sat forward, coffee forgotten. How secure are the backups? That's the thing, Nia replied. He's worried. Says someone would need high-level access to alter them, but it's possible. We need to move fast before a car door slammed nearby. Isaiah looked up to see Sergeant Cruz walking quickly toward his porch, her uniform jacket pulled tight against the rain. She glanced both ways before climbing the steps. Inside, Isaiah said to both of them, Nia, hold on. In the kitchen, Cruz declined coffee but accepted a chair, her posture rigid. This isn't an official visit, she said quietly. I reviewed the initial response logs from yesterday. Something's wrong with the timeline. Alois paused her phone calls to listen, her notepad already open. Go on, Isaiah said, putting the phone on speaker. I saw Officer Menz near the camera dome shortly after the fight. Cruz continued. Not before, like the log claims. He was checking equipment, his words. I'm filing an internal report, but she met Isaiah's eyes. The chain of command isn't clean. My captain plays golf with Slate every Sunday. The contractor's worried about the same thing. Nia's voice came through the speaker. The backup servers could prove what really happened, but only if they haven't been touched. Isaiah stood, pacing the worn linoleum. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. The attack, the edited footage, the compromised evidence, it painted a larger picture, a network of corruption reaching from street thugs to City Hall. Heavy footsteps on the porch announced Hank's arrival. He shook rain from his jacket, face set with determination, called every vet I know who was there. He reported 7 willing to sign statements, more coming forward. We'll need them, Isaiah said. But we need more. This goes deeper than just yesterday. Alois closed her church directory and opened a different notebook. This one older, its pages yellow with age. These people, she said, they recycle their tricks. Same names, same patterns. She started pulling files from her archive boxes. Land deeds showing mysterious transfers, heritage flyers from every development push, maps marked with red lines from 30 years ago when Trevor Slate's daddy was running things. Isaiah grabbed a legal pad from the counter drawer. At the top, he drew 3 columns: proof, pressure, protection. Under proof, he listed server backups, witness statements, Grand's archives. Under pressure, media exposure, internal affairs, veteran support. Under protection, camera installation, community watch, legal counsel. The rain drummed harder outside as they gathered around the table. Cruz checked her watch. She'd need to report for shift soon. Nia was still on speaker, taking rapid notes. Hank studied the old maps Alois had spread out, his finger tracing patterns of displacement and development. At the top of the page, above the columns, Isaiah wrote a name in clear black letters: Trevor Slate. The pencil pressed hard enough to leave an impression on the pages below. He thinks he can bury this, Isaiah said, looking at each face around the table, like his father buried the truth about those developments, like they've always buried their tracks. Not this time. Alois said firmly, placing another stack of documents on the table. This time we dig. The rain continued its steady rhythm on the roof as they began to plan, the kitchen table becoming a war room of sorts. Coffee grew cold in forgotten cups. Phones buzzed with more messages, threats and support mixing together, unread for now. They had work to do. Late morning, sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of Alois's dining room, now transformed into a makeshift command center. The polished oak table disappeared beneath stacks of manila folders, while banker boxes lined the walls like soldiers standing guard. A flatbed scanner hummed steadily in the corner, digitizing decades of carefully preserved documents. Alois moved with purpose between the boxes, her fingers dancing across labeled tabs with the precision of a master librarian. History doesn't disappear, she said, pulling out a weathered leather ledger. It just gets filed away, waiting for the right moment. Isaiah leaned over the table as his grandmother opened the ledger to a page marked with a faded yellow tab. The neat columns of numbers and names written in precise handwriting told a story that made his jaw tighten. Look here, Alois pointed to entries from 1988. The Downtown Renewal Committee made monthly payments to something called the Heritage Security Association. $5,000 each time. Her finger slid down the column. Always in cash, always on the third Tuesday. Nia, who had set up her laptop and mobile broadcasting equipment at the end of the table, leaned in for a closer look. The same pattern we're seeing now with the old Glory Cruise funding. Exactly the same, Alois confirmed. She reached into another file and pulled out a black and white photograph, its edges worn but the image still sharp. And here's Trevor Slate's father, Benjamin, during the Madison Street protests. The photograph showed a younger version of the same polished arrogance Isaiah had seen in Trevor. A man in an expensive suit, watching with satisfaction as uniformed men broke through a line of peaceful protesters. The date stamp read April 1989. I took this picture myself, Alois said quietly, right before they knocked the camera out of my hands. Nia's fingers flew across her keyboard, setting up a live stream interface. We're going live in 5 minutes, she announced. I'm calling it Who Killed the Cameras. We'll start with what we know about yesterday and work backward through this pattern. Her phone buzzed with notifications as her regular viewers began joining the pre-stream chat. My audience is mostly older folk, aunties and uncles who remember these times. They're good at connecting dots and sending tips. Hank entered through the side door, shaking his head. Just got off the phone with Mike Stevens. He was EMT on scene yesterday, retired now. He lowered himself into a chair. He saw something interesting. One of the patrol officers was messing with a panel under the camera dome after everything went down. Says he'll testify if he gets a subpoena, but he's worried about his pension. Isaiah's phone vibrated with a text from Cruz, heads up. Chief's meeting with ID now. Expect them to claim technical difficulties led to lost footage. They're moving fast. Isaiah muttered, showing the message to others. He picked up his phone and dialed the union office, stepping into the hallway for the call. Yes, this is Isaiah Marshall. I need representation for tomorrow's hearing. Yes, I'll hold. Nia's live stream began, her voice clear and professional. Good morning, everyone. We're investigating a disturbing pattern of surveillance manipulation and coordinated disinformation here in our city. If you were at the National Cemetery yesterday morning, or if you have any information about similar incidents, comments started flowing in immediately. Alois watched the screen with satisfaction as several longtime residents mentioned remembering the Madison Street protests. Isaiah returned from his call, notepad in hand. Union rep will be there. I've got signed statements from 12 tourists so far. He looked at his watch. Nia, what time are the interviews? 2:00, she replied between commentary to her viewers. I've got 5 witnesses confirmed, including a retired military chaplain who caught everything on his phone. Hank stood up, adjusting his jacket. You ready to head downtown? Might as well make them squirm a little before tomorrow's hearing. Isaiah nodded, gathering the most relevant documents into a folder. He paused to squeeze his grandmother's shoulder. Thank you, Gran, for keeping all of this. Just remember, she said, patting his hand, when they tried to bury the truth, that's when you know you're digging in the right place. The scanner beeped, finishing another batch of documents. Nia's live stream continued building momentum, comments and tips flowing in steadily. Alois turned back to her boxes, methodically building their case one piece of paper at a time. Isaiah checked his phone one last time. 11:45 a.m. Let's go, he said to Hank, sliding into his jacket. City Hall's going to be busy today. The marble floors of City Hall's lobby echoed with footsteps and murmured conversations. Afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the space where reporters huddled in loose groups, checking phones and comparing notes. Isaiah and Hank stood near a pillar, watching the entrance. There, Hank muttered, nodding toward the glass doors. Councilman Trevor Slate strode in perfectly pressed suit, catching the light. His son, Evan, trailed behind him, radiating entitled confidence. They were surrounded by staff clutching tablets and papers. Isaiah stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly across the lobby. Councilman Slate. The press turned as one, cameras lifting. Slate paused, arranging his features into a practiced smile. Yes. Do you condemn the attack at the tomb of the unknowns yesterday morning? Isaiah kept his tone measured, professional. Slate adjusted his tie, a gesture that bought him 2 seconds to consider. These are sensitive times, he began, his voice smooth as oil. We must all work to maintain civility and order. An elderly veteran in the crowd called out, That's not answer what we need. Slate continued, raising his voice slightly, is calm on all sides. Let's not inflame tensions unnecessarily. The lobby erupted in angry mutters. A gold star mother near the front said loudly, calm on all sides. They attacked sacred ground. Isaiah's eyes caught a glint of metal on Evan's hand, a ring with a stylized 7 set in a council seal identical to the one he'd seen on the attacker in the ambulance. Evan noticed his gaze and smirked, deliberately adjusting his cuff to display the ring more prominently. So you won't condemn... Isaiah pressed, keeping his anger in check. I condemn all violence, Slate said smoothly, already moving toward the elevators. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a budget meeting. The press surged forward with questions, but Slate's staff formed a barrier. Isaiah watched Evan trail after his father, that smirk still in place. The elevator doors closed on their polished shoes. Slippery as a greased pig, Hank growled, but we got what we came for. Isaiah nodded, his jaw tight. They walked out into the afternoon sun and headed for Hank's truck. 20 minutes later, they pulled in the parking lot of Victory Gym, a concrete building decorated with faded American flags. Inside, the air smelled of sweat and rubber mats. Various veterans nodded to Hank as they made their way to the main training area. Coach Martinez, a stocky man with graying temples, was wrapping a young boxer's hands. He finished his work before approaching them. Hank, been a minute. Need some intel, Pete, Hank said quietly, about Colt Ransom. Martinez's expression darkened. That piece of work? Yeah, he runs private classes here twice a week, calls them heritage training. Owner lets him because he pays cash up front. Who shows up? Isaiah asked, mostly his crew. Some off-duty cops, too. Martinez spat into a nearby trash can. They keep to themselves in the back room, but I've seen what they practice. It's not regular MMA stuff. Isaiah stripped off his jacket. Mind if I use the bags for a few? Martinez handed him some wrap. Be my guest. Isaiah worked the heavy bag methodically, testing different combinations. He wasn't here to train. He was reconstructing Colt's fighting style from memory, breaking down the patterns he'd seen. After 15 minutes, he stopped, certainty settling in his gut. Some of Colt's moves had been too precise, too similar to close quarters combat techniques taught to specialized units. The gang leader had been exposed to military style training somewhere. Martinez, Isaiah called. Those cops who train with Colt, any of them, work with joint task forces. The coach nodded slowly. Couple of them. Why? Just confirming a theory. Isaiah unwrapped his hands, mind racing through implications. This wasn't just street-level violence. Someone had given Colt access to tactical knowledge. His phone buzzed as he was putting his jacket back on. A text from Nia got a lead on cemetery security backups. Contractor willing to talk tonight, says files stored offsite. Time to go, Isaiah said to Hank. The afternoon light was starting to fade outside the gym's grimy windows. They had a few hours before meeting Nia's contact, and every piece of the puzzle was starting to matter more. The drizzle made dark patterns on the brick walls behind Nia's newsroom. Sodium lights cast weak yellow pools in the gathering evening gloom. Isaiah and Hank stepped out the back door after giving Nia their witness list. Good people willing to speak truth against power. The sound came first. An engine revving to loud for the narrow space. Headlights suddenly blazed at the alley's end, and a pickup truck screeched sideways, blocking their exit. This isn't good, Hank muttered, his hand moving to his coat pocket. 4 men spilled from the truck bed with practiced coordination. Isaiah recognized their leader. Immediately, Colt Ransom moving with the fluid confidence of a trained fighter. No weapons visible yet, but the intent was clear in their stance. No cameras now, Colt called out, his voice echoing off the wet brick. Just us having a friendly chat. Isaiah stepped forward, drawing attention away from Hank. He kept his hands loose at his sides, ready. The drizzle beaded on his jacket as he measured distances, angles, escape routes. The alley was tight, maybe 12 feet wide. Advantage, limited flanking options. Disadvantage, nowhere to retreat. The first attacker rushed in low, trying to take Isaiah's legs. Isaiah pivoted smoothly, redirecting the man's momentum. The attacker's shoulder crunched against the corner of a metal dumpster. He crumpled, gasping. A second man came in high, swinging wild. Isaiah parried with his elbow, deflecting force away from his center line. His knee found the attacker's thigh, disrupting balance. A precise forearm strike to the chest sent the man stumbling backward. Behind him, Isaiah heard the distinctive snap of Hank's collapsible baton extending. The older veteran moved with economy, no wasted motion. When a third attacker tried circling to Isaiah's right, Hank's baton cracked across knuckles, reaching for a hold. The man yelped, grip broken before it could set. Watch that side. Hank growled, his Vietnam-honed instincts still sharp. Colt prowled forward, testing range with quick kicks to Isaiah's calf professional moves meant to deaden the muscle. Isaiah checked the kicks with his shin. Noting the technique, he countered with a straight strike to Colt's shoulder. Enough force to sting, not enough to break. Isaiah changed levels, appearing to shoot for Colt's legs. The gang leader sprawled expertly, hips heavy, proving his training. His uppercut sliced through the space where Isaiah's head had been a moment before, catching him on the lip. Blood mixed with rain, 2 light touches, then commit hard. Isaiah read Colt's rhythm like a book. When the pattern came again, Isaiah disrupted it. A feint toward the eyes made Colt flinch high. The leg reap came low and fast, threatening to sweep his base away. That's when Isaiah heard it, the change in Colt. Breathing, the sharp intake, the controlled exhale, a pattern Isaiah knew intimately from his Delta Force days. Colt heard it too. Their eyes met in the dim light, and Isaiah watched fear bloom in the gang leader's face as recognition hit. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Colt, composure cracked, we're out. He barked, already backing toward the truck. His men scrambled to comply, helping their dazed comrades. The pickup's engine roared, tires spun on wet asphalt as it reversed. Hank had to jump aside as the vehicle whipped past, but he got one good strike in. His baton rang against the tailgate like a bell. The sound of the truck faded into the rainy night. Quiet returned to the alley, broken only by heavy breathing and the soft patter of drizzle. Red and blue lights began strobing off the wet brick. Sergeant Cruz's cruiser pulled up moments later. She stepped out, taking in the scene. Scuffed wall, the scattered trash, the fresh skid marks on asphalt. Her eyes moved to Isaiah's split lip, to Hank's still. Extended baton to their clenched jaws. They'll escalate, she said simply, pulling out her notebook. Isaiah dabbed his lip with his sleeve, tasting copper. So will we. Fluorescent lights in Nia's office were dimmed, casting a soft glow over monitors and coffee cups. The clock on the wall showed 11:42 p.m. Rain still tapped against the windows, a steady rhythm in the quiet room. Isaiah sat beside Nia at her desk while Hank paced near the door. On the main screen, a digital voice modulator created eerie electronic tones as the contractor spoke through an encrypted connection. I'm sending the files now. The altered voice crackled, full backup from all cemetery security feeds, including the mirrored redundancy system. Timestamps are intact along with complete metadata. Nia's fingers flew across the keyboard, creating secure folders as the data transferred. Receiving now. File integrity looks clean. The first video opened on screen. Crystal. Clear footage from multiple angles. Isaiah leaned forward, watching the scene unfold again. The timestamp read 5:47 a.m. There he was, performing his measured guard walk. The old Glory Cruise truck appeared at the edge of frame. The footage captured every moment in perfect detail, the jeers, the bottle arcing through Preed, on air to shatter near the wreath, the clear breach of the rope line. Stop there, Isaiah said quietly. Nia froze the frame. Can you enhance the bottle throw? She zoomed in. The motion was unmistakable, the intent clear. No editing could twist this truth. The footage continued, showing the full attack sequence. Isaiah watched himself respond with precise, measured control. The camera angles left no room for misinterpretation. Every move was defensive, protecting the sacred ground. Look, Hank pointed suddenly. Top right quadrant. 6:11 a.m. They all watched as a patrol car pulled up. An officer emerged with a ladder, climbed to the camera dome, and clearly disabled the system. The mirrored backup caught it all, including his badge number. The system logs confirm it. The contractor said primary cameras went dark at 6:12 a.m., but the backup kept recording to our secure off-site storage for another 17 minutes before auto shutdown. Nia was already organizing the footage into a structured presentation. This demolishes their narrative. The doctored clip they've been pushing, it's provably false. Now we can trace exactly where they spliced it. Isaiah pulled out his phone to call Alois. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. We have it, Gran, he said softly, the whole thing clear as day. He heard her quick intake of breath, then a quiet sniff, thank the Lord. She whispered, voice thick with emotion. I knew the truth would show itself. While Isaiah spoke with his grandmother, Hank worked his own phone. Jim, yeah, get the word out to the veteran groups. We need everyone at that hearing, yeah, full dress if they've got it. Exactly. Show them what standing together looks like. Nia had started a protected upload to multiple secure servers. I'm scheduling the live stream for tomorrow afternoon. We'll walk through the complete chain of custody, timestamp by timestamp. My regular viewers are good at spotting details. They'll help catalog every face, every badge number, every inconsistency with the official story. The next evening, the Unity gathering at Alois's church filled every pew and folding chair. Veterans sat alongside young families. Christian, Muslim, and Jewish clergy stood together near the pulpit. The air hummed with quiet determination. Isaiah spoke briefly, standing straight in his civilian clothes. "We tell the truth," he said, voice carrying to the rafters, "and we protect each other." The words rang through the sanctuary like a bell. People lined up afterward, signing witness statements and sharing their own stories of standing against intimidation. Hank worked the room with coffee pot in hand, connecting veterans with civilians, building bridges with each pour. Alois moved through the crowd like a quiet general, her notebook open, recording names and numbers. She'd seen gatherings like this before, knew their power. Every signature was ammunition against lies. The fellowship hall gradually emptied as the evening wound down. Chairs scraped across the floor as volunteers stacked them against walls. The coffee urns gurgled their last drops. Isaiah stepped outside into the cool night air, followed by Alois and Hank. They stood together on the church steps, looking out at the city skyline glowing against low clouds. Traffic moved in steady streams below, and distant sirens Dopplered past. A weight had lifted, for the first time since the attack. Isaiah felt his face relax into a genuine smile. The truth was secured now, backed up and witnessed. They had what they needed. The morning sun cast long shadows across Isaiah's front steps as he picked up the newspaper. The bold headline hit him like a physical blow, footage disputed. Judge considers gag order. His phone buzzed, Nia calling. Isaiah answered. Her voice was tight with anger. The contractor, they found him this morning in his apartment. They're calling it suicide. Isaiah's grip tightened on the phone, the one who gave us the backups. Yes, but something's wrong. He had lunch plans today with his sister. Sent her a text last night about meeting at their usual place. Who makes lunch plans if they're planning to? She stopped, collecting herself. I'm looking into inconsistencies. Inside, Isaiah's TV showed a courthouse press conference. Judge Carlton Mayer stood at a podium, his tone measured and official. Given serious concerns about chain of custody and potential tampering, this court is issuing a temporary restraining order, blocking publication or distribution of the disputed cemetery surveillance footage until a full review can be completed. Isaiah's phone lit up again, Cruz this time. Hearings postponed pending the review. They're burying the in red tape. The morning grew darker. By noon, toxic messages flooded social media. At 2 p.m., Nia called again, her voice shaking. They're posting your address, all the hate sites. I'm reporting them, but they keep popping up. I'll handle it. Isaiah said, already planning security measures, but the real blow came that evening. The crash of breaking glass at Alois's house brought Isaiah running from next door. In the living room, a brick lay amid scattered shards. A crude swastika had been painted on its surface in red. Alois stood in her kitchen doorway, straight, backed and calm despite the violation. Just glass, she said firmly. We've survived worse. 2 patrol officers took statements, but their attitudes were dismissive. Probably just kids, one said. Barely looking up from his notepad, we'll increase patrols in the area. They left without collecting the brick for evidence. After they left, Isaiah examined the brick more closely. The paint was still tacky. This was fresh, targeted. He bagged it carefully, documenting everything with his phone. As he worked, his mind circled back to the fight training patterns he'd observed, the way Colt had countered some of his moves. It hadn't been just lucky guessing. At the gym yesterday, a trainer had mentioned something about Colt's background, about some special training he'd done. Joint operations, Isaiah muttered, pieces clicking together. He did a training block with contractor units adjacent to special operations. That explained Colt's familiar counters. He'd been exposed to some of the same tactical foundations. Hank arrived with plywood and tools. As they worked to secure the window, Cruz called with more news. Trevor Slate just got fast-track approval for a Saturday event. She said, they're calling it a heritage rally, a vigil for victims of cemetery violence. Her disgust was clear. It's a trap. Word is they're planning something to provoke a reaction. They want you to lose control on camera. 2 days, Isaiah said. They're moving fast. Be careful. Cruz warned. This feels coordinated. The night deepened as Isaiah and Hank finished boarding up the window. Alois made coffee, her movements in the kitchen deliberately normal, refusing to be cowed. Isaiah stood looking at his reflection in a remaining pane of glass. The streetlight caught his face at an angle, highlighting the determination in his eyes. The past week had been all reaction, responding to their attacks, defending against their lies, that had to change, no more reacting. He said to his reflection. He pulled out his phone and dialed Hank first, then Nia on conference. "We take this to them tomorrow," he said when they were connected, no more waiting for the next hit. "I'm ready," Nia replied. "My followers are already digging into Slate's permit process. There's money moving through weird channels. Got a few dozen vets standing by." Hank added, "Good people who know how to document everything clean and clear." They talked logistics for several minutes, laying out plans for the morning. When Isaiah ended the call, Eloise was watching him from her armchair, hands folded in her lap. "Remember what I taught you about receipts," she said quietly. "Everything leaves a trail, even lies." Isaiah nodded, his jaw set. Tomorrow they would start following those trails, all of them, wherever they led. The truth was more than just footage now, it was weapon they needed to learn to wield. Morning light filtered through Aloysius' lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the dining room table, now buried under maps, documents, and laptops. The room smelled of fresh coffee and printer ink. Isaiah stood studying a warehouse floor plan while Nia's tablet chimed with incoming tips from her followers. "Look at this," Nia said, turning her screen. Property records show the warehouse at 1879 River Street was leased 6 months ago to Heritage Preservation Associates. Same day, Slate's PZ made a donation to them for cultural outreach. Hank snorted from his chair where he was checking radio frequencies. Cultural outreach? That's what they're calling intimidation now. There's more. Nia continued, scrolling through messages. "My viewers found utility records. Power usage spiked last month, way more than an empty warehouse should need. And delivery manifests show regular shipments of office supplies. Burner phones need charging," Isaiah noted, marking potential entry points on the floor plan, "and paper trails need paper." Eloise emerged from her study carrying another archive box. She set it down carefully and pulled out a folder of yellowed newspaper clippings. 1992, she said. "Same warehouse district. Different names, same game." They used those buildings to store campaign materials back then, too. Crews arrived, still in uniform but off-duty. She accepted coffee from Eloise and spoke in measured tones. "Tonight, between 2,100 and 2,300, patrols are focused on a noise complaint cluster downtown. River Street will be less observed than usual. That's all I can say." "To our window," Isaiah said. "We'll need it clean and quick." Hank opened a duffel bag on the floor, revealing neat rows of equipment, encrypted radios, high-beam flashlights, compact first aid kits, and non-lethal defensive gear. "Borrowed these from some friends who owe me." "Everything's registered and legal." "Good," Eloise said firmly. She stood at the head of the table, commanding attention without raising her voice. "Now we set the boundaries. This is about exposure, not revenge. We document, we secure evidence, and we hand it to proper authorities. No destruction, no personal vengeance, no exceptions. The truth is enough." Isaiah nodded, agreed. "We do this right." He turned to the team. "Nia, you'll coordinate from your office. I'll stream everything to you through secured folders. You narrate with a 10-minute delay for safety. My followers are ready," Nia said. "They'll mirror everything instantly so it can't disappear." "Crews," Isaiah continued, "you stay clear unless there's gunfire. We need you clean for the official response. I'll have units ready to respond to any legitimate calls," she said carefully, with full body cam documentation. "Hank, you're our exit strategy. Keep the engine running. Coordinate the veteran escort for backup. How many vehicles? 8 trucks, 16 riders, all combat vets, all disciplined. They'll create a buffer zone, nothing more." Isaiah traced the route on the map. "Primary entry here, secondary exit here. If the first route is blocked, we go north 3 blocks to the alternate pickup point. Radio check every 15 minutes. They spent the next hours refining details. Alois made sandwiches that few of them ate. The afternoon sun tracked across the floor as they wore, gamed scenarios, checked equipment, and established communication protocols. As dusk approached, they began final preparations. Isaiah changed into dark work clothes, not his uniform. Nothing that could connect this to his official duties. He synced his phone to the secure cloud folders Nia had set up, testing the connection 3 times. Hank loaded the gear into his truck while Nia headed to her office through the industrial darkness. Sodium lights cast sickly orange pools across empty loading bays. The river's constant motion sent small waves slapping against wooden pilings, providing natural cover noise. Isaiah crouched in Hank's idling truck doing final radio checks. "Remember," Hank said quietly. 15-minute intervals, 1 click for OK, 2 for trouble, 3 for emergency extraction. Isaiah nodded, testing his body camera's connection to Nia's system. A green light blinked steadily. "If I miss 2 check-ins, we come in hot." Hank finished, but clean. No heroics. The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the city's amber glow. Isaiah studied its silhouette, matching it to the blueprints he'd memorized. 3rd floor, west side. A window with a compromised lock, according to Nia's sources. "Time to work," Isaiah said, pulling on thin gloves. Hank squeezed his shoulder once. "Hunt careful, brother." Isaiah slipped from the truck into the darkness. He moved like water between shadows, each step placed with deliberate care. His breathing settled into the measured rhythm he'd learned in Deltas. Low inhale through the nose. Controlled exhale through barely parted lips. Silent, calm, the fire escape's ancient metal wanted to protest his weight. Isaiah distributed his mass along the edges of each step, close to the brackets, minimizing potential creaks. Rust flaked under his gloves. 3 stories up, the promised window waited. The lock was indeed broken, hanging uselessly from 1 screw. Isaiah eased the sash up with glacial patience, testing each inch for squeals or catches. When the gap was wide enough, he slithered through, rolling his weight across the sill to disperse it. Inside, the warehouse air hung thick with dust and old paper. Catwalks threaded between stacked shipping crates, their metal gratings stretching into darkness. Isaiah's eyes adjusted slowly, picking out shapes. A forklift's skeletal form, shrouded pallets, and above it all, a mezzanine office glowing with the faint blue pulse of electronics. He began moving, staying low, using the crates for cover. His soft, soled boots made no sound on the catwalk. When he reached the office, he found the door unlocked, sloppy security born of arrogance. The server rack hummed in the corner, fans dead but drives still spinning. Isaiah pulled his multi-tool from a pocket and removed the access panel. The problem was obvious, a disconnected power cable to the cooling system. He bridged the connection, and the fans whispered to life. Beginning documentation. He subvocalized for his camera feed. Warehouse at 1879 River Street. 2,247 hours. His fingers moved quickly, connecting a slim USB bridge between the servers and his encrypted phone. Directory structures populated his screen, innocently named folders that couldn't quite hide their contents. Accessing folder community outreach 2023, he narrated, contains subfolders for payment records coded as volunteer stipends. Recipients include known members of the Old Glory crew. He worked methodically through the files, keeping his voice steady and factual. Pass, iLedger showing transfers to Heritage Preservation Associates, countersigned by Trevor Slate. Equipment requisitions for the cemetery rally approved by Evans Slate. Rental agreement for portable stages and sound systems. A spreadsheet caught his eye. Cemetery rally provocation budget. XLSX opening file. Timestamp 2023-9-15. Line items include crowd management specialists, medical contingency, and meteor response package. The evidence was damning in its bureaucratic precision. Every transaction, every approval, every connection, all documented with the banal thoroughness of people who never expected to be caught. Was halfway through copying a folder of permit applications when the first footstep echoed from below. Isaiah's hands never faltered. The copy process continued as he killed his light and eased behind a stack of archive boxes. More footsteps, 3 sets, moving with confidence. A voice drifted up. Lights are still off, but something's different. Check the office. Another answered. The drives weren't supposed to be running. Isaiah pressed deeper into his hiding spot, angling for a view of the door. His camera kept recording, its tiny LED now hidden against his chest. A figure appeared in the doorway, backlit by the sodium glow through the windows. Colt Ransom's profile was unmistakable. The fighter's stance, the calculated swagger. 2 more men flanked him, their shoulders tense with alertness. One moved to the server rack, checking connections. Boss, the drives are online. Who booted them? Colt's mouth curved in a smile that held no warmth. He's here. Isaiah remained motionless behind the boxes, letting Colt's team spread out into the office. His camera kept recording, lens catching the harsh shadows cast by the server lights. The USB transfer blinked steadily, evidence still flowing to Nia's secure cloud. Colt bounced lightly on his toes, scanning the room. Come on out, Delta. Let's see that special training up close. Isaiah held his position, analyzing Colt's movement pattern. The fighter was favoring his left side slightly, remnant damage from their last encounter. His 2 lieutenants gripped makeshift weapons, a length of pipe, a heavy flashlight. No, Colt called, then we do this the hard way. He kicked over a filing cabinet with a thunderous crash. Isaiah used the noise to slide to a new position, but his boots scuffed slightly on the metal grating. Colt's head snapped toward the sound. There you are. Isaiah rose smoothly, hands open at chest level. You're on camera, Colt. Everything's streaming. Perfect. Colt grinned. They can watch me take down the mighty Tomb Guard. He began circling, throwing probing leg kicks that sliced the air between them. Isaiah recognized the rhythm from their previous fight, 2 light strikes setting up a power shot. He offered a slight wince when a kick brushed his calf, letting his shoulder dip as if favoring that side. Colt took the bait, launching forward with a combination. Isaiah met the rush in a clinch, absorbing Colt's short uppercuts against his forearms. When Colt tried to dirty, box from the inside, Isaiah broke the clinch with a controlled head, but to the nose. Not enough to shatter, just enough to stun. His knee snapped up into Colt's thigh, deadening the muscle. Using the bigger man's momentum, Isaiah shoved him sideways into a coiled chain hanging from a nearby hook. Colt stumbled, cursing. A lieutenant charged in, swinging the pipe. Isaiah moved inside the arc, forearm deflecting the strike, while his other hand caught the attacker's wrist. A quick, rolling motion sent the pipe clattering across the floor. The man threw a wild punch. Isaiah ducked and guided him face first into a crate. He spotted a cargo strap dangling from a ceiling hook. When the second lieutenant rushed him, Isaiah sidestepped, grabbed the strap, and looped it around the man's neck in one fluid motion. He applied pressure careful, measured, until he felt the fight drain away. Before unconsciousness hit, Isaiah released his hold, letting the man slump to his knees. Colt had recovered, circling again, but with more caution now. He changed angles, landing a sharp kick to Isaiah's calf that sent needles of pain up his leg. Isaiah shifted his weight, adapted his footwork. He altered his timing. Explosive 3-step advance, then a pause, breaking Colt's ability to predict. The change in cadence worked. Colt overcommitted to a right cross, leaving himself exposed. Isaiah caught the arm, used Colt's forward momentum for an arm, drag takedown. They hit the floor hard, Isaiah maintaining top position with his knee pressed into Colt's triceps. He kept his hands open beside Colt's head, making sure the camera caught his restraint. It's over, Isaiah said quietly. Get off him. The shout came from the mezzanine. Evan Slate stood at the railing, pistol trained on Isaiah's back. I said. Get. A dark shape burst through the side door, Hank moving with veteran speed, his baton whipped out in a precise arc, cracking against Evan's wrist. The gun spun away into the shadows, police hands where I can see them. Sergeant Cruz appeared behind Hank, weapon drawn. She kicked the fallen pistol clear, then moved with practiced efficiency to secure Evan in cuffs. The lieutenants, still dazed, were next. Isaiah turned his body camera toward the office wall. Row after row of printed documents stood revealed. Bank statements, emails, permit applications. The cemetery rally budget spreadsheet hung centerpiece, its incriminating line items clearly visible. Stage setup, $12,000. Security overtime, $8,500. Inciting content creation, $15,000. Through his earpiece, he could hear Nia's voice narrating each revelation to her viewers. Routing number matches previous payments to known Old Glory crew members. Email chain shows Trevor Slate personally approving the content strategy for what they're calling the confrontation phase. Beneath him, Colt made one last attempt to buck free. Isaiah calmly re-established control, keeping his breathing steady and measured. Sirens grew louder outside. Cold ransom. Cruz announced clearly for the camera, "You're under arrest for conspiracy, assault, and violation of federal hate crime statutes." She moved to Evan. "Evan Slate, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted assault with a deadly weapon." Isaiah stood slowly, hands raised to shoulder level, making his compliance obvious to both the approaching officers and Nia's audience. His camera caught everything: the evidence wall, the fallen weapons, the controlled aftermath of necessary force. The warehouse filled with flashlights and radio chatter as tactical teams secured the scene. Through his earpiece, Isaiah heard the steady tide of Nia's followers reacting in real time to each new document revealed in the delayed stream. The truth was flowing into the light, unstoppable now. Blue and red lights painted the warehouse walls as Isaiah stood with Cruz near the command vehicle. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications from Nia's live stream, viewer counts climbing past 6 figures, comments flooding in faster than moderators could track them. "Look at this," Nia called from her laptop setup nearby. She turned the screen to show a wall of timestamps and screenshots. The aunties and uncles are cataloging everything. They've already traced 3 shell companies through the permit documents. Hank settled onto the bumper of his truck, cleaning his baton with methodical care. "Good thing we got it all on camera this time." Isaiah watched as evidence techs carried out boxes of hard drives and documents. Each item was photographed, logged, and sealed in clear bags under the harsh portable lights. Cruz's superior officers huddled near their vehicles, phones pressed to ears as they dealt with the growing political earthquake. Just before midnight, phones lit up with breaking news alerts. The state attorney general appeared on courthouse steps, face grave in the camera lights. Given the extensive evidence of corruption, conspiracy, and criminal enterprise revealed tonight, I am announcing the immediate formation of a special task force, she declared. Emergency subpoenas are being served as we speak to preserve all related documents and accounts. Isaiah felt Aloysa's hand slip into his. She had arrived minutes after the arrests, refusing to wait at home. Now she squeezed his fingers as they watched justice begin to move. About time, she whispered. Through the night, developments snowballed. By dawn, the judge who had issued the gag order called an emergency hearing. With barely concealed embarrassment, he lifted all restrictions, citing overwhelming public interest and verified chain of custody of evidence. The district attorney's office released a terse statement just after sunrise to avoid any appearance of conflict. This office is recusing itself from all related cases. Hours later, the state appointed a special prosecutor who wasted no time filing initial charges. Isaiah read the charging documents on his phone. RICO violations, wire fraud, conspiracy, witness intimidation, assault. The list sprawled across multiple pages. They're not playing around, Cruz observed, reading over his shoulder. RICO means they can seize everything, accounts, properties, all of it. By early afternoon, Trevor Slate's carefully crafted world imploded. News helicopters circled his office building as he emerged, flanked by lawyers. His resignation statement lasted barely 2 minutes before he was escorted to a waiting police vehicle. The city manager's office quickly announced the Heritage Rally permit was revoked, citing public safety concerns. Within the hour, the cemetery administration released a public statement. We deeply regret our failure to support Guard Marshal during this ordeal. A full review of suspension protocols is underway. We extend our sincere apologies and look forward to his return to duty. Isaiah's phone rang. Near again. You need to see this, she said without preamble. The server files show they were planning similar provocations at 3 other historic sites. They wanted to force out black families all around the cemetery district. Send it all to Cruz, Isaiah replied. Let's make sure nothing gets missed. Back at Aloysius' house, the living room transformed into an impromptu community center. Neighbors streamed in with casseroles, flowers, and handwritten notes. Alois labeled each dish with military precision, adding them to her meticulous filing system. Now expanded to include a food and flowers section, Mrs. Patterson's mac and cheese delivered 2:15 p.m., she murmured, writing in her neat script. Walker family rolls 2:45 p.m. Hank helped direct traffic, setting up extra chairs as people lingered to share stories and watch news updates together. The house filled with the warmth of community and the smell of home cooking. 2 days later, Isaiah sat in the cemetery's wood, paneled boardroom. Sunlight streamed through tall windows as the board voted unanimously to clear him of all charges and restore him to active duty. The chairman, a retired judge, leaned forward. We'd like you to speak at next week's rededication ceremony. We're adding a plaque to honor those who have defended this ground from acts of hate. Isaiah considered carefully. I accept on one condition, he said. The money seized from Slate's nonprofit, I want it used to seed a fund for families targeted by these schemes and for preservation of these sacred spaces. The chairman glanced at his colleagues, then nodded. Motion to establish the fund as specified. All in favor. Every hand rose without hesitation. Approved unanimously. The chairman declared, bringing down his gavel with a sharp crack that echoed like justice served. A week later, sunlight spilled across the national cemetery.